Hey everyone, welcome back to I Dare You Sleep. I know a lot of you love to fall asleep to these creepy stories, but before you do, leave a comment and let me know where you're listening from around the world. And if you're enjoying the thrills, don't forget to like, subscribe, and see if you can make it through without losing any sleep.
On Halloween night in 2020, a large abandoned mental hospital on the outskirts of our town had always been a hotspot for mischievous teenagers. They would gather to drink, graffiti, and cause chaos. Eventually, word got to the town officials, and they ramped up security. That year, my friends Jake, Ryan, and I decided to explore the place. Despite hearing that all the windows on the ground floor had been barred with steel and the security presence had been increased, undeterred, we cut through the woods to avoid being spotted by security. Eventually, we reached the side of the building with no guards in sight. After hopping the fence, we started searching for a way in. Ryan noticed a window that wasn't barricaded with steel, only rotting wooden planks. We figured it wouldn't be too difficult to break in, so with some teamwork, we managed to pry the wood loose and slip inside. I quickly placed a piece of debris over the window to hide our entry point. Inside, it was a complete mess, junk and rubble everywhere. Jake had brought some spray paint, intending to tag the walls, and we all carried flashlights since it was pitch dark. The silence inside the hospital was chilling, a stark contrast to the windy, noisy night outside. Our plan was to reach the roof, so we began looking for the stairwell. The hallways felt eerie, like we were the only ones who had found a way in. After climbing 6 flights of stairs, we realized there was still one more level to the roof, but the stairs in this part of the building didn't go all the way up. As we wandered down a long, creepy corridor, a loud bang echoed from the far end. We aimed our flashlights in that direction, but the hall was too long to see anything clearly. It became apparent we weren't alone. We quickly changed directions to avoid whoever or whatever had made the noise. While navigating the maze of hallways, I kept glancing behind me, my nerves on edge. As we turned a corner, I suddenly heard a creak behind me. When I turned to look, I saw someone peeking around the corner, watching us. The moment I noticed them, they disappeared. I shouted, but my friends didn't see what I saw. We went back to investigate, but there was no one there. My friends thought I was messing with them, but I knew we weren't alone in that place. Eventually, we reached a section of the hall where most of the floor had collapsed, leaving only a narrow strip to cross. Ryan, always the bravest, insisted on going first. It wasn't a far drop, just into what seemed like an old bathroom. To cross, we pressed our shoes against the wall and held onto a rusty pipe for support. I went last, and as I was halfway across, something grabbed the back of my shoe. At first, I thought it was one of my friends playing a prank, but that didn't make sense. They were already ahead of me. I had no free hand to hold my flashlight, so I couldn't see what was pulling at me. Panic surged through me, and I screamed, loud enough to echo through the building. My friends rushed back with their flashlights, and as light flooded the area, whatever was holding me let go. I heard the sound of footsteps running below. We didn't dare check what or who it was. Instead, we hurried back down the stairs. But we had another problem. We couldn't remember how we got in. We'd blocked the window with wood, and now we were frantically searching for it. Every corner we turned, I expected to see that figure again. And then it happened. As we rounded another corner, I saw the same person from earlier, partially hidden behind a wall at the end of the hall. This time, I could see that they were wearing a mask. Was it the same person who grabbed me through the floor? I wasn't sure, but I wasn't about to find out. We turned and ran in the opposite direction, not stopping until we finally found the window we had entered through. Climbing out was quicker than getting in. By the time we were back outside, most of the commotion around the building had died down, and security seemed to have cleared out the rest of the trespassers. We could have warned them about the masked person inside, but we didn't want to risk getting caught ourselves. Instead, we sprinted back through the woods to the car. We spent the rest of the night hanging out in a parking lot, shaken but relieved to be out of that terrifying place. That was our Halloween of 2020, and it's a night I'll never forget. When I was 10 years old, my parents allowed me to go trick-or-treating without them for the first time. I went with my best friend, Sam, who was also 10. We were supposed to be home by 9 p.m., but the night was so much fun, and we lost track of time as we wandered the quiet suburban streets of our small town. The houses in our neighborhood were spaced far apart, which meant more walking and less candy, but we didn't mind. It was Halloween, after all. As we approached the last house on our route, a large, isolated place on the corner, tall hedges surrounded the property, giving it an eerie, secluded feeling. We rang the doorbell, like we had at every house before, and waited. An older man, probably in his late 50s, with thinning gray hair and a tired-looking mustache, answered the door. He smiled in a strange way, asking us what our costumes were, and speaking to us as if we were much younger. Then he asked if we were with anyone else, seeming surprised that our parents weren't there. What happened next is burned into my memory. The man opened the door wider, revealing a homemade obstacle course inside his living room. It was made from cardboard boxes and Halloween decorations, like a tunnel you had to crawl through. I'll admit, it looked pretty cool. He told us that if we wanted candy, we had to make it through the obstacle course. Sam and I exchanged glances, tempted. It seemed like a fun challenge, and we didn't think twice before saying yes. The man gestured for us to come in, but his eyes were fixed outside as he slowly closed the door behind us. I entered the tunnel first, with Sam close behind. It was darker than I expected inside, lit only by dim orange Halloween lights. Fake spider webs and creepy decorations filled the small space, making it seem like a real haunted maze. The tunnel was surprisingly long, twisting and turning through the living room. We had a hard time finding the exit, but eventually, it led us to a small, dimly lit room. In that room, there was a note on the wall, pointing to a door. It read, "Candy down here." Sam opened the door, revealing a set of stairs leading to the basement. More orange lights flickered at the bottom, but the man was nowhere to be seen. Hesitant but curious, we started descending the stairs. When we reached the bottom, all we found was an empty basement. Before we could react, the door at the top of the stairs slammed shut, the sound echoing in the dark. We rushed back up, trying to open it, but it was locked. Panic set in, and we began banging on the door, screaming for help. That's when we heard the doorbell ring again. Over and over, someone else had come to trick or treat. We pressed our ears to the door, hoping to hear something. The front door creaked open, followed by what sounded like two men arguing. Suddenly, the basement door unlocked and opened. A man and a woman stood there, and the woman quickly hugged us, telling us to follow them. We didn't hesitate. As we were led through the living room, I saw the man who had trapped us. He stood silently in the corner, next to his bizarre cardboard creation, watching us with cold eyes. The husband, who had rescued us, called him a sick freak. As we hurried out of the house, the couple took us to their home across the street, where they called the police. The wife stayed with us, asking questions about what the man had said to lure us inside. They had seen us enter the house from their window, and immediately knew something was wrong. When the police arrived, they found more than enough evidence to arrest the man. At 10 years old, Sam and I didn't fully grasp how dangerous the situation had been. But looking back now, I realize how lucky we were that those neighbors were watching. They saved us from something much worse, and justice was served that night. Ever since I moved to my new house in Cedar Grove, Halloween has been my least favorite holiday. The idea of strangers coming up to my door all evening, asking for candy, just didn't sit right with me. But every year, I dealt with it, smiling and handing out treats. My property is quite large, with no fences, which meant kids would sometimes run through my yard spraying silly string or, worse, TPing the house. I've had to clean up that mess more than once. One Halloween night, long after most of the trick-or-treaters had gone home, I got one last ring at the doorbell. My dog, Luna, went crazy, barking like she'd been doing all evening. I opened the door to find someone standing there in a full-body gorilla costume. But it wasn't a cute or funny gorilla costume. The face was twisted, designed to look eerie and menacing. He didn't say trick or treat or anything at all. He just held up a small plastic bag with a few pieces of candy inside. Since it was the end of the night and I still had a lot of candy left, I decided to give him a generous handful. I smiled and waved him goodbye, but he didn't move. Instead, he just stood there on my porch, slowly sifting through the candy I had just given him, inspecting each piece. I started to close the door, but I hesitated, watching him. He looked up at me, still silent, his eyes hidden behind the dark, unsettling mask. I asked if he wanted more candy, but he didn't respond. He just kept staring. Feeling uneasy, I quickly shut the door and locked it. I wasn't in the mood for games, and something about his presence felt off. I went back downstairs to my den, where I'd been trying to watch a horror movie. That's when I heard something fall outside. The back door was right next to the couch, so I took a few steps to look out through the glass. With the patio light on, I could see that a rake, which had been leaning against the wall, had fallen over. I found it odd because it wasn't windy at all that night. Feeling a bit paranoid because of Halloween, I decided to step outside and investigate. I slipped on my shoes and went out to pick up the rake. As I did, I noticed the door to my shed, at the far end of the yard, was slightly open. I have a huge shed where I store all my outdoor equipment, and I was sure I had closed it earlier that day. I walked over to check it out, using the flashlight on my phone because the lights in the shed hadn't worked for years. I wasn't sure what I was expecting to find, but when I stepped inside, my heart skipped a beat. There, sitting on a large box, was the gorilla mask. I shone my phone's light deeper into the shed, and that's when I saw him. The man in the gorilla costume was standing in the far corner, but now he wasn't wearing the mask. He was facing the wall, motionless. I took a cautious step closer and realized he wasn't a kid. He was an older man, with a gaunt, haggard face and hollow eyes that seemed lost in the dark. I didn't know if he'd noticed me yet, so I began to back away slowly. But even though I didn't make a sound, his head suddenly snapped around, and his eyes locked onto mine. I could barely breathe. For a split second, I thought my heart was going to stop. I bolted out of the shed, slamming the door behind me. I ran back toward the house, and as I did, I heard the shed door burst open behind me. I didn't look back. I just ran inside, slammed the back door, and locked it. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone and called the police, reporting a trespasser on my property. By the time the police arrived, the man in the gorilla suit was gone. They searched the yard and the shed, but there was no sign of him. They told me they'd patrol the area and keep an eye out for anyone matching the description. After they left, I was too rattled to finish my movie, so I decided to head to bed early. That night, I woke up to Luna barking downstairs. I got up and tiptoed to the den, where she was standing by the back door, growling low and ferociously. I took a quick peek outside, not daring to open the door, and didn't see anyone. The shed door was still shut, but the yard felt different, like something was out there, watching. I hurried back to my room, bringing Luna with me, and tried to sleep, but I could still hear her growling occasionally through the night, which sent chills down my spine. The next morning, everything was normal again. The sun was shining, the yard was empty, and life went on as usual. But that Halloween was, without a doubt, the scariest one I've ever had. And to this day, I can't forget the unsettling gaze of that man in the gorilla suit, hiding in my shed.